Okay, this is the Four Seasons Survival Directory, the Snake Slides, Slide 1.
Oh, this is the program I had set up in, let's see.
What are these names?
Okay, these are Glypha, Opistoglypha, Proteroglypha, and Selenoglypha. They're just different types of snakes. And like the Opistoglypha was a rear fang snake. Proteroglypha was a member of the Cobra family, neurotoxic. Selenoglypha was your rattlers and so forth. But a lot of snakes they have discovered have both neuro and blood toxin elements in them.
2.
This is again Proteroglypha. Your Lapidae is your Cobra family, and your Hydrophidae is your sea snakes that are poisonous. They attack the respiratory system.
3.
And this is the Viper family and the Crotalidae family, and this is your pit vipers and your vipers.
4.
This is a snake bite kit. It's a serum kit that I carried in Thailand and Vietnam.
5.
And this is a suction kit that is not used, and I used it for illustration. That cutting and suction sometimes did more harm than good. Okay, this is a pit viper illustration, and you can see that it has a pit, and it's a heat sensor. This is why they can hunt at night and kill game because they sense the heat of the animal.
7.
Again, let's. Boy, I haven't looked at these for years. What does that say?
The top one says lateral view of the head of a pit
viper. Okay. Okay, but some pit vipers and vipers are different shaped heads too.
8. Pit viper at in Afghanistan.
Yeah. No, that's a gistrodon. A gistrodon.
Yeah.
And you found these in different parts of the world.
9.
And this one here is
King Cobra.
King Cobra. Yeah. They're chewers. When they bite you with their fangs, they have what they call a canaliculate fang, and the poison from the poison sac is released, and it comes down into this canal-shaped tooth or fang, and then they chew on you. They don't just strike and move away. They kind of chew, and they have what's called a maxillary bone, and it presses on the poison sac, and then it releases it into the into the fang and then into the person.
10.
Let's see. I am not sure.
11.
Okay, that's a cobra fang. That's a canaliculate fang. And
in the front here on the left.
They're shaped that way. Now, as they lose those fangs, these up here, the other teeth, take the place.
Just move forward.
Yeah, they move forward.
12.
Okay, this here is in Thailand, and we found some old Japanese barracks in Tak Lee, and we cleaned them up and cleaned out all the snakes that were in there, and but we couldn't get rid of the scorpions or the centipedes. They were all over the place. And poisonous type of spiders. But it was on this floor here that I got a kite. He'd gone up to the second floor. It was a very, very poisonous snake. And I'm trying to think of what the official classification of it was.
So what was this base being repossessed for use by the locals?
No. What happened was we were striking into Laos across the Mekong River. And I was the intel type of the squadron out of Louisiana. And it was my job to gather in intel that I could feed to the pilots. And so it was intel coming in from the in-country types of agents and so forth, people who could verify. And in fact, I told them that a report I had was that the Pathet Lao now had quad machine guns and anti-aircraft weapons. And we found out they did because they got one of our aircraft. But these, again, were just old Japanese barracks that are cleaned up.
13?
This is the sleeping quarters, and this is where I first had my billet here. And you notice the mosquito netting. That's to keep the scorpions out.
They could crawl up the sides?
Oh yeah, yeah. They'd crawl up the legs of the bunk.
Wow. And
the guy next to me used to come in at night loaded, and he would just flop down in his bunk. And I told him, I said, you know, you're going to be sorry. I said, one of these nights these scorpions are going to get you. And I remember during the night he came in, and then during the night I heard him rolling and tossing and groaning. And here he had some scorpions in bed with him, and they were hitting him. And so I took him to the dispensary, and I guess he recovered all right. But after that, he made sure he got his bunk, he got his mosquito netting up.
How poisonous were the scorpions and stuff over there?
They were semi-poisonous. They would affect elderly people or young babies.
14.
Okay, this is on a Thai railroad, and these are a couple of individuals that I met, and this I got a little ride in this cart down the railroad track. It was kind of interesting. I think the guy to the right is it was one of the guards at the air base.
Next.
Yeah.
15.
Okay, this is a Russell's Pit Viper, and they were all over the place. And I would go out at night and out on the runway, and where they sought warmth. And I'd see them take off in the high grass, and then I could follow them by the movement of the grass. And then I would usually put my foot on the head of the snake, then reach down, pick them up, and put them in a bag. And I think this is the one that struck me. It got me in the seam of my fatigues, and actually left venom on the on the seam of my fatigues. And the guy that was with me, that was holding the bag, never came again. So I always had to go by myself to.
Wasn't that the one where you were out? He was holding the light, and you were kind of going through the tall grass. And when he saw it hit you, he just dropped the light and ran.
Yeah, he really he kind of backed up and took and said he quit. He said that was the end of his helping me. But it's a mean snake and quite prone to attack.
16.
Now this is a Malaysian Pit Viper. This is the one that I was awakened about 4 o'clock one morning by the CQ, the charge of quarters, who had just come from the kitchen area. And the kitchen was a tent on pallets, and he said that the cooks saw a snake under the refrigerator sitting on this pallet, and that they weren't going to cook breakfast until somebody got that snake out of there. So I got semi-dressed and went over, and I asked the cook, I said, they were standing there, boy, they were really afraid. And I asked him where it was, and they said, so on the refrigerator. I thought, well, it's probably gone now. So I stuck my foot on the refrigerator, and he hit my boot. He actually put a groove in my boot. And I said, oh, you're right, it's still under there. And so I got a stick, and I asked the cook for a can, like a coffee can, and with a piece of cardboard. And then I reached underneath the refrigerator and brought him out. And then I just put my foot down gently on the back of his head and picked him up and put him in a can. And then I went back to the barracks and went to sleep. And this time I'm in a room with another guy. And this guy woke me up every morning with smoking. It was terrible. And so I woke up smelling his cigarette. He was leaning on his elbow looking over at me. And I thought, oh, this is a snake. And I reached over and I took the lid off. Well, the snake popped up. He fell over backwards out of his bunk, literally fell over backwards onto the floor when he saw the snake come out of the can. And he went screaming, literally hollering, to find the squadron commander to report me. Squadron commander thought it was the funniest thing he ever heard. And so the guy moved out of my room. Nobody would move into my room. For the rest of the time in Thailand, I had that room all to myself.
That must have been nice.
Oh man, he wouldn't even talk to me. I was called the Snake Man, you know. It was funny. But again, this is a Malaysian Pit, and he was really prone to striking. He was more of an attack snake than a Russell's. Okay.
17.
This is the same. This is the Malayan Pit Viper.
18.
And that's an up close, and you can see the pit, the opening between his eye and the front of his mouth. And again, was a heat-seeking type of snake.
19.
This is a green tree pit viper, and they're very hard to see because they hang out in the trees. And one of the guys saw the snake in the tree, so I went and retrieved it. And sure enough, it was a green tree pit viper. And this is one of the dangers over there, is that you could be walking along under a tree or a bush, and where they're up there looking for bird nests and bird eggs and so forth, and actually get hit by one of these.
20?
You know, I don't recognize that snake, Oak.
Okay. 21?
This is a cobra, and I was down at YC's snake house in Bangkok, and in fact I called him and told him I had this Bungarus flaviceps. That's the crite, and and Pope and Taylor and Ditmar were all professional herpetologists, and they said they'd only found 5 of this species in Asia, and so I found the 6th species. I mean, there's number 6 of the same species. But when I told YC on the phone, I called him from Tok Lee. I'd found out about the snake house. Now they also had a snake farm in Bangkok, but this is a snake house. And he had a very good operation going there, and he would milk the snakes of their venom and then use it for anti-venom purposes. But he was excited that I had this snake, and I told him I would bring it down. This is the time that I had several snakes. I brought them down, and I had them in an orange crate. We went down to get a ride on a 119 down to Bangkok, and the guy who helped carry the box down said to the loadmaster of the 119, he says, "Oh, you're going to have a fun trip." He says, "Got a bunch of snakes in here." And I told him to say nothing. Well, the loadmaster went berserk. And then the pilots heard about it. And then there were some Marine Corps aviators, jocks there, and they said they would not ride in the same aircraft as these snakes. We were 45 minutes late taking off, and the agreement was, I told them I had them individually wrapped in bags, which I did not. And the agreement was that I would sit by the door, it was an open door, and that if the plane developed trouble, I was to kick the box out.
Mm-hmm.
And the pilot was still hesitant, but the co-pilot says, "Oh, let's go," you know. So we got on board the aircraft. We went down to Bangkok, and I guess I told you the story about the snake house, didn't I?
I'm not sure.
Well, anyway, I got down there and I offloaded and carried the box outside the base where taxis were lined up. And I told the guy that I wanted to go to the snake house. And he said, "Snake house, snake house." "Yeah, okay." And I could see he didn't speak much English. So we headed down to the snake house, and he took a side street, and which I thought, well, that's funny. And then he went into a courtyard and said, "Here." I looked around and I said, "No." And then he leaned forward and he pointed up at the second story balcony. He says, "Here, here." Well, there's a bunch of girls lined up. And it took me a moment to grasp. He thought I wanted to go to a house of ill repute. And so I said, "No, no." So he backed out into the street and started, and I said, "Hold it, hold it." This guy walking up, and oh no, I'm getting ahead of myself. So he says, "Oh, okay." So he took me to another side street, And it was another one of these places. And then when he left there, he went out in the street and was confused. Now he's really confused. So I told him to hold it, hold it. And there was a guy walking up the street, and I told the guy what it was. I said, "You speak English?" "Yeah, yeah." And he did. And I said, "Will you tell the taxi cab driver that I want to go to the snake house? I have some snakes. I want to take to the snake house." And he told the cab driver the information, and the cab driver went, "Okay." Well, and I thanked the guy. We started down the street, and he literally took both hands off the steering wheel, put him on the back seat, and said, "Snake, you no tell, you no tell." And he drove like mad to the snake house. Wycia was standing there, and it was a roundabout, gravel. He skidded to a halt, jumped out of the taxi, and starts jabbering away. And Wycia looks at him, looks at me, and starts laughing. And so I paid the taxi cab driver, and he is still talking up a storm. And he gets in, and he starts away, and he's still shouting stuff out. And Wycia is really bent over laughing. And he said, "Okay," he said, "you're the craziest Joe, craziest Yankee has ever seen in his life." Oh, it was hilarious. So
Wycia was the
he was the head of the snake house.
and those other names you mentioned, Pope and I think that was it. There were like 3 or 4 other names you said were these well-known snake handlers.
Yeah, Pope, Taylor, and Dittmar were all well-known herpetologists back in the 20s and 30s. And they had done extensive research. In fact, in Thailand, I'm not sure I have it, but we had some of the guys were living in and operating out of tents. And the one guy went into his tent, saw a snake, went back out, got his bayonet, came back in, and just as he was approaching the snake to whack him, the snake spit. It was a Sputatrix cobra. And all 3 of those herpetologists said in their books there were no spitting cobras in Asia. They were in Africa. Well, we had to, the pain was almost intense immediately, and we had to load him on board an aircraft, fly him to Bangkok, where they got a jet then, and took him to the Philippines, to the hospital, and they had to wash his eyes out all the way, because it has a very debilitating, I guess you'd call it venom. I mean, it's, there's another name for it.
When you say all the way, are you saying they had to remove his eyes?
No, they had to wash his eyes out with solutions. And he never did return. So I'm not sure whatever happened to him. But it was a total surprise. And by the way, when I first got there, there was about 144, 145 of us. And we had a doctor, a general practitioner. And so I asked him one day when I was first there if I could check his serum. And I did. And I checked, and every one of them was outdated for all the different species of snakes. They were all, and I told him, I said, these are outdated. And he says, yeah, I'll have to order some more. He never did. So I was always concerned if I got bit, what would be the outcome. because they'd have to take me to Bangkok for treatment, and they did have a hospital down there that could treat you, but why they didn't send this guy that was hit by the Cobra, I don't know, but they ended up flying him to the Philippines.
And you were bit once in New York. When you
In
were
New York,
younger.
yeah, that was a copperhead, and he got me in the right thumb, and the more the fleshy part, and that was kind of an interesting thing because I noticed we were out in the kind of in the wilds because we're going to put a pipeline across the Mohawk River, and I was at the time working for Hartford Brothers, and I was going to be fitted up with a diving suit, and we were going down to New Jersey to get a suit for this George Shadman and myself, and he was going to give me the ropes on how to lay the pipe and so forth. So anyway, we were doing a survey, and we found that where the pipeline was to go, there was a bunch of logs and railroad ties by the river, and so we thought that we would move them. We had a small Caterpillar tractor, and I took the chain and threw it down over the logs and the pilings, or the railroad ties, and I started to reach my hand in, and I thought, well, I'd better take a look. And so I did look. I didn't see anything. So I reached in, and I was pulling on a chain, but the chain was hung up. So I then went and gave it more slack. Put my hand under again, and I was pulling on the chain when I felt a stinging sensation. And I took it out, and then I saw two punctures. I knew I'd been hit, and I'm quite sure that it was a copperhead rather than a rattler. It could have been a rattler. So the guy with me wanted to take me to the doctor's right away, and I said no. I said it's too far to the vehicle, and a Caterpillar tractor wouldn't quite hack it. So I sat down for about 20, 30 minutes, and I saw a red streak going up my arm, on the inside of my arm, and it got up to my elbow, and I just sat there very relaxed and I felt a little funny, but I felt very relaxed and kind of controlled my heartbeat. And so I guess it's close to an hour. I decided that it wasn't progressing any further, and that I would walk slowly up where the vehicle was, and which I did. And then he took me into town. We were staying at a hotel in Boston Spa, and I just got better and better and better. The effects were wearing off. But that was the probably the worst time I ever had was when I was bit in the ankle in Sile by a spotted adder, a non-poisonous snake. I had jumped over a log, and when I did, was going down to the swimming hole, and I was barefoot, and I felt as I jumped over the log and started to move forward, I felt this sensation, something hit me. I looked back and saw it was a spotted adder, and looked at my heel, and it looked like it had drawn um, some blood. But I dismissed it. I was only about 11 or 12 years old. I dismissed it, and I ended up with blood poisoning um, from it. But I was in bed 2 or 3 days, and but I never was taken to a doctor. But the nurse diagnosed me as having blood poison, however that was.
How old were you when you were bit by the copperhead working?
I was about 20.
How old were you when you went into the military?
Um, I was I went in the National Guard, first Pennsylvania National Guard, when I was about 20, and then my job assignment was by Hartford, was up in New York State. So by that time, the Korean War had broke out, and so I quit my job, came back to Pennsylvania to see what kind of obligation I had, because we heard that the Pennsylvania National Guard was going to be federalized. I came back and was sent to Camp Atterbury for 2 weeks, what's called boot camp. The Guard went there every year for 2 weeks training. So while there, we got the official notification that we were federalized, and now we're going to be shipped out to Camp Atterbury, Indiana. And then
So when you got the news, how did you get chosen? You went through something to be sent to officer school, but then they made the mistake.
oh yeah, Mel Tharr from Chicago and myself took the OCS exams and were sent to Fort Benning and Student Company 13. And we were sent there for OCS. And we found ourselves, after we were assigned billets, we were told to go down and collect our books. And we went down and we standing in line, and all the books said intelligence course, intelligence course, intelligence course. So finally I asked this one guy, and I said, what's this? I said, we're here for OCS. Oh, he said, this is the intelligence course. And I said, well, who's in charge? So he told me about this captain. I went to the captain and I told him, hey, we're in the wrong course. And he checked the paperwork and he says, hey, sorry, you're assigned to intelligence. And he said, the only thing you could do is, when you get back to your base, your post, he said, resubmit your applications and come back. We got back and got sent to Germany. So then it was years later that I got out after Korea, came back to the States, got out for a couple of years, and then I joined the Air Force Reserves. And in 1955, I accepted active duty. So I was at that time a tech sergeant, and I was sent to I was sent to Sampson Air Force Base up by Geneva, New York. And then I was only there for a few months, and then I went to Texas, to Shepherd Air Force Base, and then your mom joined me. I was only married 2 weeks before I was activated. Before I was sent to Camp Atterbury. But I was sent to Germany, and I worked with the German intelligence for a year, and then the base was turned back to them. It was Kaufbeuren Air Base. And from there I went to England for 2 years. And I worked in intelligence in England for 2 years. And then we went to Indiana. And that's how we ended up in Indiana for almost 3 years and joined the church. And then from there to the Philippines. And you have it from there. Well, you got it interrupted from my snake slides.
Yeah, that's okay. 22.
And that's another picture of a cobra, and with its hood.
23.
And that's a king cobra. Now you can see the hood is elongated. It's longer, and it doesn't stretch out quite as far. But these snakes are very very deadly, and the king cobras can get up to 14 to 18 feet long, which is enormous. And they make their nest on the ground by coiling leaves and branches and stuff into a big nest, and they crawl inside.
24.
That's another king cobra.
25.
And that's a king cobra showing its glottis. It breathes through the glottis when it's swallowing food, so it doesn't choke.
26.
That's a baby king cobra, and they're deadly. Well, I see I had several of them, but you can see that they come out when they're born. They're ready to strike.
27.
That's another picture of a baby king cobra.
28.
Now this is the crite, the Bungarus flaviceps, and this is the one I took down and gave to Waisia. It's a deadly snake. In fact, more people, percentage-wise, are killed by the crite than they are by the cobra.
What's the difference between the two?
There's very little difference. They both are neurotoxic, and the only difference is in their shapes and their coloration.
29.
This is the head of, oh my goodness. Like I said, it's been years since I reviewed these. That's okay, show me the next picture.
30.
Okay, that must have been the head of a Russell's. That's another Russell's Pit Viper.
31.
Yeah, this is where I took the snakes and released them, and I agitated this snake a little bit, so he struck my boot. That's another Russell's Pit Viper.
32.
And this is a Russell's, and notice that the one fang, its left fang, seems to be missing. So evidently it lost it, but you can see the right fang hanging down from this nail.
33.
This, oh my, I'm trying to think what this snake was. Oh my. Anyway, this is a snake that I was taking slides of, and Waisia put him on the ground, and I was going forward like this, trying to get it in focus, and it struck my camera. And Waisia was kind of unnerved to think that I was that close to it. But it's a poisonous snake, and I'm at loss. It's been so many years.
34.
This is a python that we caught. It was about 14 feet long, and it we had an interesting story. One of these guys, I think it was the second guy next to me, I said, look, we've had this snake out in the sun quite a bit. It's a cold-blooded animal. And I said, we need to get it in the shade. And some of the other guys said, well, one more shot, one more shot. And so we built a cage for it. And I finally talked to guys and said, look, that's enough. There's too much sun on this snake. So we put him in his box. And I told this guy here, I think it was him, the second guy, I told him to put some water in to the cage. And instead, he threw water, a bucket of water on the snake, and the snake instantly got rigor mortis. It died. So it was interesting.
Why did the snake why did it die like that?
It was so hot, being out in the sun. Then all of a sudden, the shock of coal or just of water being thrown on it.
35.
This gives you another view as to how long the snake was. You can see all the guys lined up.
Wanting to get their pictures sent back home.
Yeah, that's what I meant. It was taking so long. So many guys with cameras wanting pictures.
36.
Yeah, this is a close-up of the snake's head.
37.
And another close-up.
38.
This is shows a snake. It just came to me. You have two systems when you get hit. Actually, you have the lymph system and the blood system. And the lymph system moves much slower through your system, through your circulatory system, and that's why if the poison is caught up in the lymph system, then again your chances are much better. It's when it gets into the blood system that's bad. Now, here's a picture of a snake. All snakes can unhinge their jaws, so they can take in a much larger object.
39.
And again, this just shows a sequence of the snake swallowing an egg.
40.
And that's another one.
41.
These are poisonous spiders found in Asia. They're really the jockeyback. We call them a jockeyback spider. Is a kissing cousin of the black widow, but it's more venomous.
Is this a picture of the jockeyback?
Yeah, I think it is. There's another name for it. We call them a jockeyback.
What's the first one here is obviously spider. What are these other three?
Can you enlarge that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's these are just additional shots of the bottom and the top.
Okay. 42.
Okay, this is one of the spiders. It measured about 4 inches, but some of them measured like 5 and 6 inches over there. And this was a spider that when they were cleaning the upper floor, they were stomping around, and I felt something hit my shoulder. And I looked, and here was a spider. 4 inches is quite long.
Mm-hmm.
But you did find them up to 5 and 6 inches.
That startled you a little to see a spider on your shoulder?
No, he fell off.
Fell off your shoulder?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean,
That
Why
didn't
hit
startle
you?
me.
Okay.
No.
Just checking.
Okay.
43.
This is a spider actually found in the Philippines. I think it's a Heteropoda venatoria, a jumping spider. And this is what was in Carrie's room. I wasn't just like it.
That was jumping around.
Yeah, it was jumping from wall to wall. Oh, it was amazing. We found it. Your mother did. She found it before
in bed.
in bed, and found it before we went to church. And so your mom shut the door.
Well, I sprayed it with about 4 or 5 different things, and you
couldn't kill it.
Couldn't kill it. So I shut the door so it couldn't get out. I hoped.
And so we got home and we hooked up the, found out it was still there, hooked up the vacuum cleaner, and sucked it up.
Our good old Electrolux.
Yeah, and it made a clunking.
All the way down the hose.
And that was like 4 or 5 inches from front leg to back leg.
Now, is this it seems like there's another story where Mom called you to come home from work one day to catch a spider that was jumping around also, but maybe this is that.
No, this is the same
story.
one.
Okay.
That's the only one.
Yeah.
44.
Oh, this is a tarantula found in southeast Thailand. They're very large, and it's really it's semi-poisonous, but your most poisonous tarantulas are found in Sicily.
45.
These are the typical scorpions we had over there. They just were everywhere, and they were 6 and 8 inches long from the tip of their tail to their pincers.
46.
Just another shot at.
47.
This is a interesting moth. It's called a urticating moth, and it really caused a serious dermatitis condition because the wings were made of it's like a porcupine, and they would land on you and leave a it's like a type of protoplasm that you get from caterpillars, and where they can walk across your foot or your hand and it leaves a mark, and that's the protoplasm that's creating that effect.
48.
And this is a scorpion that I caught over there.
49.
This is a centipede, and actually that centipede is about 10 inches long. I don't know if I got another shot of it, but you can see the front pincers, and they are semi-venomous. We had a guy in the latrine one day. We were up in the barracks. We heard this screaming noise, and he came out of the latrine, and we were looking down, and he was hollering. He had a centipede, this centipede here, I think, that was in his pants. So when he pulled him on, the centipede started pinching him, and he was trying to get his pants off. But he had quite an experience.
51.
Okay, this is again another shot of Russell's Pit Viper,
52.
and that's at Malaysian Pit again.
53.
These slides are kind of mixed up. This is again a baby King Cobra,
54.
and that's a King Cobra.
55.
This is in Vietnam. This is one of the curators of the Pasteur Institute, and he took this snake. This is the one I was telling you about. This probably should be with the Vietnam slides.
Yeah, you've probably just got two slides. So we did this with the Vietnam slides, because we've already had him and your story about when he tossed the snake in.
Yeah, that's the snake he tossed in.
But this was specifically, you had a second slide made, I guess, for your slide presentation, and this is part of it.
Yeah.
Because this whole sequence of slides we're going through all came out of one of your carousels that you sent.
Yeah.
It was your presentation. So, 56.
That's Wycia. Very nice individual. You can see the sign up there. Reflects that he's got poisonous reptiles.
57.
That's just another shot of a head of a poisonous snake.
58.
And
it's the first time I've ever seen you in a short sleeve shirt.
yeah, sometimes I wore a short sleeve shirt over there. The again, that's a another shot of a snake, poisonous snake, and I was kind of careless in that I didn't really have its head pinned down. You can see his head. So I wasn't overly cautious.
59.
Oh boy, I think that's a typical sea snake, but I'm not sure. It's like a coral snake. It's a kissing cousin of our coral snakes.
Is it the king snake?
No, nope. No, this is a venomous
Okay.
snake.
60.
That's a another picture of a just a regular cobra.
61.
Oh, gee, these are leeches, and you can see them on the guy's foot. They had so many different kinds of leeches over there. They had one called the buffalo leech that could take a cc of blood from you, and then you had the pharyngeal leech that would get into your nostrils and so forth. It was very small leech, but it would kind of be clinging to branches, and as you walk by, it would just attach itself to you. We had a small leech over there that would actually go through the eyelets of your boot, and you wouldn't know that you had them on you until you felt something wet in your boot, and here was blood from them sucking the blood. But they had an ingredient in their saliva. The bite was almost painless, but they had an ingredient that was an anticoagulant factor in their
Venom.
no, in their saliva, and it would, so you'd keep on bleeding after they let go.
62.
That just shows an animal getting a leech into its nostrils.
63.
That's a banded sea snake in the bottom. Wait a minute. No, that's a coral snake, and then there's a cobra. They have almost the same venom.
64.
And that again is just another type of spider, venomous spider.
65.
These are definitely sea snakes. And it's been reported that they have found them in masses in the ocean, thousands of them, just coiled around each other. But they are venomous.
66.
This is a coral snake.
7.
This is the canaliculated fang of a venom canal. Wait a minute, that's like a hypodermic needle. This must be a viper, a viper fang.
Just a cross section of it.
Yes, yeah, cross section.
69.
And again, certain seashells found over there were venomous. And that's one of the venomous types. And there is a shot of another spider.
Ultradictus geometricus.
Yeah, I'm not sure the name of it now.
70.
This shows a suction device that is now frowned on, has been frowned on for years.